Hello and welcome to the 2024 Week 1 edition of the Base on Balls podcast. I'm your host, Cody. I'm joined tonight by Paul. Paul, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back. Good to get back in the podcast lab with you, Cody, and as well, Connor, as well as you. Um, I'm excited about this season. I'm excited to talk baseball again. So I'm ready to get to it.
Absolutely. And yes, Connor is our special guest tonight. Connor, how are you tonight?
Doing phenomenal. I guess I was a special guest a couple times last year, and it's always a pleasure doing this. And glad that we get to talk some baseball.
Yes, sir. And we are glad to have you guys. We are just going to jump right in. Week 1 was action packed, to say the least. We had a lot of really interesting matchups. The first matchup I want to go to is what ultimately ended up, in my opinion, being the matchup of the week. That was the Amarillo Sod Poodles coming so close to a massive upset. Connor, you fell short here, it looks like, by around 31 points. The Portland Sea Dogs Jab took the win there. He scored 908. Connor scored 877. Connor, I'm going to let you go first. Did you expect to be in this week? Kind of what was your thoughts as the matchup progressed?
Just given the names of Jab's offense, I did not think I would be in it. I'm very happy with my team scoring kind of in the middle of the pack when many people, including myself, thought I would be a bottom 3 team. I think Jab is not a big fan of depth. He likes to keep his stars, and when your pitching has as many injuries as the Sea Dogs do, that can make things tough. But I'm very pleased with the results. Matt Chapman, 54 points. Brendan Donovan, 35 before I traded him to Tita. Taylor Ward was 63. I'm confident that's going to be the case, but the better team won, and hands off to Jab for sticking through it.
And Paul, what did you see in this matchup?
Yeah, so it's interesting looking at these numbers. We obviously had the extended week, but first thing I look to always is pitching. 251 points from Jab this week. Yeah, that's a pretty low number, and it's, to me, a concerning number. Connor touched on it that he had a lot of pitching injuries, as kind of is the theme in Major League Baseball this year. All these pitchers going down, but it's definitely, Connor hit on it. He definitely likes starting his stars, playing his star players, looking at his bats, not too many bench bats, whereas Connor, was grabbing everything from the cupboard. But overall, it was a close game. I kind of was hoping Connor would shock the world week 1. And even losing by 31, I think he did shock the world. And I think he kind of announced that, he might be still rebuilding, but he's a team that's going to surprise 1 or 2 teams, I think, this year.
Yeah, for me, super interesting matchup. One I was following, as Paul touched on, it was an extended matchup. And, I think in a 7-day week, I think Connor probably would have been able to pull off the upset. This matchup was really just kind of a day too long for Connor, and Jab's Horses was able to kind of carry him over the finish line. I'm looking here at the offensive performance for the Sea Dogs, and really, his big time bats performed. Tatis 72 points, Juan Soto 68 points, Jordan Alvarez 72 points, Bobby Witt 80 points, Ketel Marte 90. I mean, yeah, the list goes on and on. The Sea Dogs performed well offensively. But yeah, the pitching was definitely what held the Sea Dogs back. 251 points, very poor performance from the arms. And I think the other thing that kept Connor in this matchup was, he threw so many different bats at the Sea Dogs, and they all I mean, all these guys performed, really well, and it kept Connor in it all week. Ultimately, he did fall short, but Paul, I think you made a great point. Connor last year may have been conceived as an automatic win. I don't think he's going to be thought of that this year. I think when you see Connor come up on the schedule, you have to worry about what he's going to throw at you. And he's going to manage the team well, and he's going to be in it. It's a really, really interesting matchup to watch. We will jump over now. Let's talk about the no-hitter matchup between the Nashville Sounds and the Bismarck Larks. Tita really ran away with this. The no-hitter kind of took him over the top, and then after that, Bracton and the Larks was never able to get back in it. The final score of this matchup was 1,180 to 846. Paul, I'll let you go. What did you see in this matchup?
Yeah, so obviously the no-hitter, the story of this matchup. No name, what's his name? Ronel Blanco. Yeah, I mean, I guess I should know it. He's thrown 15 innings this year. He's allowed 1 hit. But just breaking these numbers down, that pitcher alone scored 200 points. Without that, Tita loses the pitching matchup by about 100 points. But even more importantly, if you even take away that no-hitter, he still wins this matchup. Take 200 points away, he still beats Braxton by 100 points. So, we all kind of had our thoughts and our feelings about Tita's team this year, as it reflects in our rankings and our preseason rankings. But kind of like we've alluded to, kind of like I think everybody thinks, Tita is a pretty good fantasy player. I mean, he makes trades when he needs to make them. It's not very often that he just outright loses a trade. There's generally some sort of method to his madness. And Tyler O'Neill scoring 100 points, hitting I think his 5th or 6th straight opening day home run. Jaron Duran, the 2 Boston outfielders, combining for 180 points. That's pretty significant. And then for Bracton, I assume we'll get into the most recent call up next week on next week's pod. But his offense pretty abysmal, 448 points. Not very good. I think we all kind of thought that Bracton might take a step back this year just because he has just a ton of youth. He really has doubled down on that youth movement, at least with his bats. So there's going to be a lot of growing pains. We'll see. It's to be determined if this strategy that he's currently got on is going to pay off for him. And it's probably not a strategy that we're going to see whether it'll pay off or not actually be realized for a while. So, Bracton 0-1, it's salvageable. He can still come back from it. But, we'll see what happens with his offense and with his arms.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on here that I kind of shocks me, honestly, and I know Tita felt like we was all kind of hating on his team this offseason, but let's be honest, going into opening day, I don't think you could make an argument that Tita had a top 10 roster in this league. Definitely not top 7. I really don't think Tita in his heart of hearts would even argue that point. But, take the no-hitter out of this, 666 points offensively. That's big. I mean, Tyler O'Neill hit 5 home runs for 100 points. Marcell Ozuna is killing it for Tita. Jaron Duran, Willie Adames, Eugenio Suarez, MJ Melendez with a massive week, 74 points out of a catcher. That really is, what propelled Tita to victory. He outscored Bracton's offense by, give or take 220 points. He won this matchup by, right at 300 points. So I mean, the offense is what carried him, and obviously the no hitter helps for sure. You know, pitching, you take away the no hitter, the pitching is lacking big time with the Sounds. But again, as Paul touched on, you know, Tita's going to work this roster every day, every week. It's going to change. It's going to look different. It's going to evolve. And, you know, all Tita cares about is 1 week at a time and winning week 1. And now he's focused on winning week 2. And he'll make corrections as he's needed. As far as Bracton goes, you know, I don't want to be hard on the guy because I really do like some of these youth players that he's brought in. These are high-end guys. Jackson Morrell, he traded Jordan Walker, Jackson Churio, Anthony Volpe, Nolan Chenal, Vinny Pasquantino, who I think he's moved and traded for again. I'm not sure where he ended up. But, you know, I do like what he's doing, but you got to say, guys, he kind of asked for this. You know, the low pitching numbers here, 398 points from his arms. He doesn't have the horses. He's focused so much on young bats and was, you know, a bunch of lottery tickets pitching wise, and it didn't work for him. Louis Varland got him 0 points in a start. Soroka -3 points. Casey Mize 8 points. You know, between those 3 guys, they combined for 5 points. You know, and if Bracton's going to compete, if Bracton's going to be involved, you know, in a playoff race, he's gonna have to go and get some arms. He's gonna have to go and get some guys that are consistent, that he can depend on, because he doesn't have a single one right now, and that's definitely going to hold him back. I do want to shout out Frankie Montas, was big for him, 57 points. I think that let's see, I believe I'm right that he has since traded Montas. But of course, we'll talk about trades from the week. But anyways, yeah, Tita's surprised with a big, you know, almost 1,200 points. Bracton, I thought he was what we thought he was going to be. And that's kind of how the matchup fell. Connor, I'll let you talk for a little bit. What did you see in this matchup?
Well, I think Paul used the phrase that I would use to describe this entirely: growing pains. There is just so much variance on Bracton's team that this team will have some ridiculous outbursts one week and terrible ones the next. Michael Kopech was demoted to the bullpen. Does he become a all-star closer, or is that just a waste of a roster spot? Another thing I'd like to point out is just Tita's moving gives him so many options. Bracton, I think, used 16 hitters in this matchup, while Tita used 23. So you just have more bullets to use for that, and the offense outscored by 200 points accordingly. Jackson Furio at 52. If he keeps that up, Bracton's mega deal for him is going to look great. Bryce Terang with 35 is someone I've always really liked. And then Batita, I'm not sure if I want to bring in specific names because who knows if they're there next week. But I think Tita has a beat the Lark safe and sound and has an easier schedule the next 3 weeks. So I'm curious if that builds his team up and where he takes it from there.
Absolutely agree on all points made there. We will move on now to the third matchup of week 1. This turned out to be a very, very interesting matchup. The Rocky Mountain Vibe with 1,061 points take down Scott's Richmond Flying Squirrels by a score of 972. So this ended up being a 90-point give or take matchup. Was really interesting. Bride jumped out to a massive lead when the matchup first started. I think, you know, at one certain points in the matchup, he was leading by over 200 points, close to 300 points, and Scott just kept battling back. This is almost the opposite of the Connor Jab matchup. I think Scott actually wanted this matchup to continue a few more days. I think he would have caught Bry, but you know, really, really good matchup. These are two teams. Bry was pretty much a consensus playoff pick. Scott's been someone kind of borderline. Had a rough season last year. Team looks a lot better this year. He did get some respect in the preseason rankings. Not quite a playoff caliber team yet. Most people don't think, but I think he's showing that he's for real. Bry's offense scored 593. Scott matched him at 545. From the pitching department, Bryce pitching scored 468. Scott was right there at 427. Very, very interesting to see. It was really interesting to see Bry manage with the 10 waiver ad cap. It was different, not the normal Bry matchup. He kind of had his roster and threw it out there, and it was enough to get him the win. Some really good pitching performance. I think we all noticed Bry really focused on his pitching this offseason, improving it. Tariq Skubal was the guy that he brought in this offseason, 62 points and 2 starts. That was huge for him. Cole Raggins, another guy that he brought in kind of late in the offseason, he hit 60 points over 2 starts for Bry. Yeah, really good matchup by both. I thought Scott, similar to Connor, is kind of proven that he belongs. His team's getting better quick, and he may find himself in a playoff race later in the season. Connor, I'll go to you. What did you see in this matchup between Scott and Bry?
So hats off to Bry for the win. Obviously, we thought that he was going to be a playoff team, and he scored the 4th highest points in the league this year. Woohoo! I think the big thing with Bry is we kind of associate him with streaming a bunch of relievers, but now there are some big closer names. Ryan Helsley, Jason Foley is very clearly the high leverage guy in Detroit. Robert Suarez. These people are going to get their opportunities and keep it there for a while. I want to focus on Scott. For the rebuilding teams, a common theme we have is the hitting is very developed, but the pitching is a little bit tough. The pitching in this matchup was incredibly competitive. 40 points against a team where we laud Bryce pitching quite a bit is incredible. Jordan Hicks with 59 points. There were a lot of questions on how he would look as a starter. Brady Singer with 77. His developing of other pitches seems to have worked well. Michael King, and then some very smart streams as well. So hats off to Scott. The offense did fine. I thought his Bryce Harper acquisition was excellent, but I think if Scott can continue this pitching consistency, he is going to be a true threat for a playoff spot.
And Paul, what did you see with this matchup?
So I echo what both of you guys said about Bry. I was counting pitchers while you guys were talking, and Scott actually had 2 more pitchers used in this matchup than Bry did. So I'm pretty confident that that's the first time in league history that that's ever happened, that Bry was out positioned, outstarted, outplayed, not played, but you know what I'm saying, by the other team. And it made a difference. I mean, as Connor just said, they were very close in their total for pitching, just a 40-point difference. So I think it says a lot about Scott and his roster. The one name I wanted to bring attention to is Brady Singer. Brady Singer's kind of been a very up and down pitcher in his career, but he just dropped 77 points in this matchup. Of the 2 teams, that's the highest pitching total between these 2 teams for the first matchup. So, if Brady Singer is your guy that you can, start to kind of build around, form your pitching staff, there are worse names to do that with. As for the bats, it was kind of already touched on, but pretty close. As Connor said, bats are kind of easier to get. Arms are the gold around this league, as everybody knows. So the bats were pretty even, which I would kind of anticipate. Scott's got a great team. He doesn't have Lourdes Gurriel anymore, fortunately for me, But otherwise, some really good names. Ryan Mountcastle's been good to start the year. CJ Abrams, a really good young player, kind of coming into his own with the Nationals this year. So, really good performance, just under 1,000 for the week. So, Scott's got his arrow pointing up, and Bry obviously he's already there and, is looking to get in playoffs again this year.
For sure. And we will move on now to another very interesting matchup. It was the Hartford Yard Goats versus Chad's new look Oklahoma City 89ers. John Height pulled out the win, 1,136 points to 943. Chad fought hard, but John Height's just too much offensive firepower. Paul, I'll let you start with this matchup. What did you see in this one?
So the clear and obvious headline here is the pitching. Chad outscored John Height's pitching by 60 points. I mean, that's pretty significant because, John Height's team, undefeated last year, didn't lose a game, won the championship. Pitching was a big deal and a big part of why he was able to not lose a game last year. And yeah, he dropped 1,100 points. He got 721 points from his freaking bats. It's an insane number. He's got Mookie Betts. He's got Shohei Ohtani. He's got Matt Olson. He's got stars all through that lineup. So putting up that number is not very surprising. But 415 points out of the arms is about average, I would say, maybe a little bit above it. So just to put that in perspective with what Chad did with 474, it's a big deal. And, Shane Bieber was his biggest scorer and obviously went down with Tommy John surgery. But the emergence of Reed Detmers, this guy struck out 12 batters in 6 innings in his last start against Boston. That is significant because he's a young player. He's been bouncing around rosters, but he is young. He's only, I think, 24, maybe 25. So yeah, we all kind of said that Chad maybe had a dark horse playoff team this year with what he did in his February draft, along with all the call-ups he's made, Colt Keith, Jung-Ho Lee, Wyatt Langford, Evan Carter. All these guys are going to be massive contributors on his offense, on his bats this year. But if he can, kind of rally around maybe a Reed Detmers, a Kyle Harrison, Brennan Pfaadt, Joe Ryan, he's got good players, Yamamoto. So, 474 points from his arms, obviously with a long week, it's higher than it will be normally. But I think consistently he can get 300 points a week out of his arms. And for me, that's kind of the benchmark of, okay, if you're over 300 in a week from your arms, you have a chance to win. And I think he's going to have a chance to win most weeks.
And Connor, what did you see with this matchup?
Yeah, with height, there's not much left to say. 1,100 points, just casually over a long week. Nothing new there. Maybe a little bit lower than expected. I think the projection had him at 1,182, but a lot of us had Chad either in the last spot of the playoffs, the first 2 seeds after, and this team is showing it's coming on quicker than expected. I completely agree with the pitching. A lot of it's going to come to that. Hunter Harvey with 43 points. If he remains a closer for the Nationals, that could certainly be something. Luis Severino did not do too great, but we all know he has the potential to fix it. And Yoshinobu Yamamoto looks like he is settling in just fine. So with Chad, this team is only going to get better as more of his big prospects are called up. But this is a phenomenal showing, and this might be the team I'm most excited to watch over the next 2-3 weeks here.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of looking at some numbers here, I think Paul touched on the yard coach John Heights pitching at 415 over the extended week. That is very concerning, very disappointing. But I think what's almost even more stand out to me is without a Tita no hitter, John Height leads the league in scoring through week one. You know, even with his arms doing what I think he would be the first one to admit, very lackluster. He still had a massive, massive week. And again, as you guys have touched on, I'm echoing here, it's all offense. And it is insane, some of these numbers. I mean, 721 total points is really going to be hard to beat, even when the arms are down. And listen, when it comes to his pitching, there is multiple reasons to be concerned. You know, does he get anything out of Garrett Cole this year? Framber Valdez just went on the IL right after the Astros said he probably wouldn't have to go on the IL with a sore elbow. Um, you know, we know he's not going to get anything out of Otani from the pitching side. Max Fried has looked really terrible early this year. You know, to me, the depth isn't there that he had last year. I noticed that, you know, he was really relying on some pitchers here this week. That's kind of surprising to me. He used Chase Anderson for a start. He used Tyler Alexander in Tampa Bay for a start. Um, you know, if John Hyde even has mediocre pitching, I'm not sure he's beatable. But if it's less than that, he can be exposed. And you know, depending on how you play, you know, you could steal a win from him. For Chad, I think you guys touched on it perfectly. You know, he this rebuild is almost like an instant rebuild. It's happened quick, and I think it's legit. I think he's real. I think this team is going to be really, really difficult to play this year. I think he's going to be in every matchup all season long. You know, the Wyatt Langford, Evan Carter, Jung Ho Lee. I mean, it's a completely different team than last year for Chad. And I know he's going to have a lot more fun managing this year compared to last year, where last year it was just sit and stockpile draft picks and wait. Now he kind of gets to see the fruits of that labor. I know he's disappointed with taking a week one loss, but I think you know, there's a lot to be excited about in Oklahoma City, and you know, it's going to be really fun to see how that team maneuvers through the season. So we will move forward now. Let's jump into the my matchup versus Paul. The Bowling Green Hot Rods took down the Norfolk Tides, 1,122 to 998. Paul, I'll kick it over to you. What did you think about this matchup?
So overall, I liked how my team performed. Fairly balanced, 578 from the bats, 420 from the arms. You know, I just have a lot of injuries with my arms. Some expected, some unexpected. I mean, I traded for Kyle Bradish knowing that he'd be out for at least the month of April. And then I have Joan Duran, who tore his pec in spring training. So, I mean, it's a balance. I'm trying to navigate through it. I mean, I'm having to throw guys out like Alex Wood out there, knowing that he's only getting 5 points in 2 starts. So ideally, I'll improve with my arms as guys start to come back, hopefully. But as for my bats, I bet a lot on Eloy Jimenez this year, and he strained his adductor in the 3rd game of the season. So more of the same there, unfortunately. But my biggest bet, the biggest one I have, the one I'm the biggest fan of, Spencer Steer. Spencer Steer was on Cody's roster most of last year. I don't think I traded with Cody to get him, but I did trade for him in this offseason. I'm just a massive Spencer Steer fan. He dropped 105 in this extended matchup. you know, I've had inquiries about trading him. I'm not really looking to do that right now, just because of how good he is and how good I think he can be. Plus, he has multi-position eligibility. So Steer's kind of not going to go anywhere for a while, and hopefully he can keep doing what he's doing. But as for Cody and as for his team, 600 points from the bats, it's a very impressive number. But I was able to kind of keep pace with it. Only a 25-point difference there. And then obviously the matchup was decided on pitching. He outscored me by 100 there. His bullpen's lock solid. Clase, Doval, and Phillips, just really solid. Closers all for three good teams. But as for his starting pitching, Shota Minaga, his MLB debut pretty much couldn't have went better than it did. The only way it would have been better is if his second start didn't get rain after 4 innings. He probably would have had another quality start, probably would have had another 20 points or so. But obviously a really good player there. And then just really solid all around. Chris Sale, back to kind of what he's been. Tyler Glasnow, being very successful in LA. I think I traded him, Jose Barrios. Oh no, I traded Barrios to Bracton, and then but anyway, Jose Barrios, very good pitcher, very solid. And then he still had guys that underperformed. Mitch Keller, only 8 points, and then in his start just I think today or yesterday, dropped 36. So yeah, there's clear room for Cody to improve on what was already just a stellar performance. He and John Haidt kind of still at the top of the standings, I think. But Cody's a great in-season manager. He'll keep doing what he has to do to stay up there. So, but overall, just a good matchup. A tough matchup for me to start the season with. But we'll see where my team goes.
Yeah, for me, this was really a close matchup. Paul, you're right. Offensively, you stayed neck and neck with me all week long. I felt it as the matchup moved along. I kept feeling like I would have really big pitching performances, and I would think, oh man, let me check the box score. I think I've pulled away. And then Spencer Steer would have a 30-point night, and it would just stay the same. So, it was a really good matchup, a little revenge. I'm pretty sure you ended my season last year in the playoffs. So
I did. I did.
yeah. It's a little nice to kind of make things right, so to speak, in week one. For my team offensively, really happy with what Jazz Chisholm was able to do. 62 points. Mike Trout, 74 points. He was a guy I got pretty cheap in the offseason that I was really stoked about that move. I thought, I thought my offense was good, but just inserting Mike Trout into that is big. Luis Robert really didn't give me too much, and then of course he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. But I really at the start of the matchup I wasn't even using Lourdes Gurriel Jr. And then I realized the man's just a Norfolk Tide killer. Home run, home run, home run. Had to get that guy in the lineup, and he ended up with 95 points over the matchup. So, but yeah, offensively, I think these two teams are very, very evenly matched. And yeah, I think I kind of pulled away in the pitching department. Shota Imanga was a guy I was really excited to get this offseason. He was big for me in week one. Tyler Glasnow, a guy I'm relying on, 67 points. There was a point in this offseason where I kind of was going to move a pitcher. Couldn't decide. I was either going to let George Kirby go or Logan Gilbert go. Ended up moving George Kirby, who I think is a phenomenal arm. I wasn't excited to move him. I am excited to see through 1 week Logan Gilbert's making it look like I made the right decision there. So I'm happy with what Logan Gilbert gave me. Chris Sale, really happy with what I'm getting out of him. I just don't hold my breath. Every time I see that he's a probable pitcher, I get pretty nervous. and got good out of my bullpen. For Paul's pitching, I think Paul's right, man. It's injuries. He's piecing the puzzle together right now. If this staff gets healthy, if this staff would have been healthy week one, I think this matchup would have been decided by maybe 10 or 15 points. One person I want to touch on is Tanner Hawk, 85 points over 2 starts. Just absolutely incredible. For him, I've always liked him. Boston's been kind of wishy-washy on, do they want to start him? Do they want him to be the closer? I think he's showing they may want to keep him in the rotation. That was big. Freddie Peralta was 62. I know that's Paul's guy. Paul's really going to rely on him to carry. Sean Manaea was 63 points. I don't know where that came from, but I know Paul was excited to get that. And as good as my closers are, Paul, you hung with me, man. Alzolay with 25 points without a blown save, he would have been upwards of 40 plus. Edwin Diaz, he's back. I know you're glad to have him back after losing him all year last year. He had 47 points. And Griffin Jack stepped in as the Twins closer and got you 33 points. So, I was excited to get the win. Paul's a very quality team. Paul's definitely a playoff caliber team. I was nervous going in. I was nervous throughout the entire matchup and was glad on Sunday evening to kind of secure it. Connor, what did you see with this matchup?
Before Connor goes, sorry to cut you off, Connor.
Go ahead, Paul.
Let me just say, I fucking hate Lourdes Gurriel, and I hope I never have to fucking play this guy again. I hate this guy. He kills me all the time. He killed me when he was on Scott's team. I don't like that he's on Cody's team because Cody kills me, except for the one playoff matchup. Cody kills me regularly too. So I hate that guy. I don't like him at all. The only way to stop him is to acquire him. And the second I acquire him, he'll stop performing. So I hate him, and that's all. Okay, you can go ahead now, Connor. Sorry.
All right.
I did find it funny that during Paul's analysis, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. was not brought up because he was an integral part to some upsets last year. Paul at the number 7 seed last year did upset Cody, and I think going into the year, everyone had Cody ranked higher, and this is that gritty performance that would help. Luis Bear being injured doesn't help things. All these pitchers have injuries. Tyler Glass now has looked fantastic the first 2 weeks, so I think that could be a really key player. I agree with Cody's analysis that Mike Trout was acquired for relatively cheap. Right now, he is outfielder number 1, I believe, so that could be a pretty big coup from height as people try to topple the current champion. But with Paul, I do see some grit. Carlos Carrasco at 23 points. Because of the injuries, Paul made some very smart waiver wire adds. Dakota Hudson with 20 playing in Colorado and not necessarily against some easy teams. George Kirby, who is one of my 5 favorite pitchers in the game, had 32. So, he's just going to do better than that going forward. Freddie Peralta, big time game. Spencer Steer is going to determine a lot of Paul's team going forward. 105 points. I think he could be a top 30 fantasy asset. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out as this young Reds lineup goes forward. It comes down to pitching in the end. Cody with 500 points in an extended week. Terrific. I don't know. This was a very good matchup, and it'll be very interesting to see how Paul's pitching and Cody's bats go going forward.
Excuse me. So we will move on now to the 6th matchup of week 1, which was one of our more lopsided affairs. Clearwater Beach Dogs take down the El Paso Chihuahuas 1,001.2655. This matchup went, I think, the way everyone expected it to go. These are 2 teams headed in very, very, very different directions. The Beach Dogs is a top 4, top 5. Some people think top 3 team. and the Chihuahuas was kind of consensus 14th, 13th best. Smell is definitely focusing on a rebuild, and these week one results definitely show that. Pitching wise, I think that the Beach Dogs had an okay performance at 437. I think Hen Dog would be the first one to admit that he expects more. I will say the injuries to definitely Spencer Strider is just that is impossible to overcome. You can't lose Strider and replace that kind of production. I know that's going to be hard, but also, Justin Steele ended up on the IL with a bad hammy. That's definitely a tough week for Hendog, but there's a lot to be excited about. Grayson Rodriguez with 74 points across 2 starts. We've all been waiting on that guy to get going. Yu Darvish, 42 points. Cutter Crawford with 51 points. That was big for Hendog. Nick Pavetta with 54 points. Zach Wheeler, consistent as they come, with 60. So I think Hendog would be okay with his pitching performance, but I think he would agree it needs to be better. But it's awful concerning to lose that many arms to injury and that caliber of arms to injury. That's going to be really tough to replace. Offensively, I think that's where Smell kind of carries. That's his calling card. You're rolling out Kyle Tucker, Ronald Acuna Jr., Corbin Carroll, Bo Bichette, Jose Altuve, who just does not quit hitting. I think Hendog's going to be happy with this matchup, but I think he still fell kind of behind the upper echelon of the league through week one. Plenty of time to catch up and make that difference, to kind of solidify his spot in the top 3 or 4 of the league. For Smell, I won't dive in too much here. These guys he's throwing out, the man started Javi Baez this week. He's just kind of filling holes right now. His focus is on prospects and draft picks. And there's going to be brighter days in El Paso. But I think week one is a good indication that it's going to be a long season for Smell. Paul, I'll let you go. What did you see in this matchup?
So I'll start by telling Smell what he apparently wants to hear. He said today at about noon that my team doesn't officially suck until I hear about it on the pod. Smell, your team officially sucks. Okay. So you have heard it. You are no longer a championship contender. So there you go. But to get into analysis, it's kind of hard because I'm clicking through his players. Jackson Merrill's no longer on his team. Christopher Morel no longer on his team. Jordan Walker, he just got, I believe, this week. So it's kind of a constant state of in and out for Smell and his players, which for a rebuilding team is to be expected. You get a guy, he gets hot, you trade him, get some assets, and it kind of just keeps going and going and going. The wheel keeps turning. So it's going to be that kind of a season for Smell. He's going to pull his best Chad impression come next February, where he will run the draft. So that's kind of what he's looking forward to, I think. But then for Hen, and you touched on it a little bit, Cody, he really got decimated, I think, more than anybody this week with injuries. Losing Spencer Strider possibly for the year, losing Steele for a few weeks. Pavetta, I don't think he'll have Tommy John. I think they just said it's a flexor strain. So he might get him back in a few weeks, which is good news. But I mean, otherwise, it was, obviously it was a good week. But the long term maybe is a little bit affected. Hen's bat's really good, really young. Kyle Tucker, Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll, his first home run tonight, I believe, of the season. So hopefully that'll get him going. Pete Alonso, obviously, really good player. Didn't show up too much this first week, along with the rest of the New York Mets. But otherwise, Hen's got a really good roster. I put him as my number one team preseason. I still think that he's got, the tools and the players to be that, at least up there with the best teams. But he's going to need a little bit of luck, a little bit of injury luck for the rest of the way.
And Connor, what did you see in this matchup?
So I think it's going to come back to depth. The biggest offseason trade of the move, in my opinion, was Hen acquiring Ronald Acuna Jr. for a big package. But the biggest one that's relevant here is Luis Castillo moving to the now Sea Dogs. It's just tough to move pitching right now with all the injuries. So I think the biggest part of how Hen has the first few weeks of the season and competes with those top dogs is how he adapts to that. Does he trade out of some of his big hitters or pitchers, or how does the depth look going forward? And then for Smell, he accomplished what he needed to. There were a couple bats that showed some talent. Nelson Velasquez seems like he could be a decent outfielder. Jordan Walker was acquired, and Smell's been very smart in making a couple big splashes for those young, talented players. But this wasn't a competitive matchup. I think the bigger concern is how will Smell compete against teams, and then for Hen, can you stay with the top dogs given the current injury landscape?
Yes, absolutely. And we will move on now to the final matchup of week one, which was the Kannapolis Cannonballers at 844, taking down Dave's Rochester Red Wings, 689. Kind of some interesting numbers here to talk about, guys. Paul, what did you see with this matchup?
So the first thing I'll say for Dave, 205 points from the arms. It really gets weighed down when you have three players that went negative. Kyle Freeland had negative 26. Kyle Hendricks had negative 12. JP Sears had negative 7. I mean, when you hamstring yourself with negative, quick math, 45 points, that puts you in a hole that's really tough to get out of, especially when you don't have necessarily that talent in the pitching department. So, Dave really kind of started behind the eight ball and really didn't get out of it. But, he made a good effort with his bats, 484 points from the bats. He's got some, really good young players like Riley Green, 55 points. Josh Jung, I think we all kind of feel for him. He's really been bitten by the injury bug his entire career so far, dropping 60 points, but then breaking his wrist on a hit by pitch. I just don't know how you can get more unlucky. But even still, William Contreras with Milwaukee, 69 points. Torkelson, down week probably for what he should be, only 28 points. So there are bright spots for Dave to look at with his roster. But it's probably not going to be the best of years simply because he's still looking to build those arms up. And then as for Hamko, 524 from the bats. He's got really good players. Teoscar Hernandez dropping 85. Michael Harris with 69. Key Brian Hayes, who I think is due for his breakout season this year. No home runs in that first week, but I definitely think they're coming. But, he's got good arms finally, I think. Not, elite arms, but Garrett Crochet. I mean, Garrett Crochet drops 88 points. The dude hadn't started a game since high school, but has made 2 starts so far for the Chicago White Sox, and just 21 strikeouts in 18 innings. It's crazy. I mean, and that team's not very good. But if he can be that bright spot on that pitching rotation, that's something definitely to look forward to. Dylan Cease, a good player. Steven Matt's a good player. Charlie Morton's still hanging on, pitching pretty well. Garrett Whitlock for the Red Sox, really a good player. Kind of was with Tanner Hoke on the border of maybe not being in the rotation, but has made 2 starts and has looked pretty decent in both of those. So, Hamko, we said last year that he was a very unlucky owner, and that he had a roster that was capable to make the playoffs. I still think that's the case. He's got good players. Paul Goldschmidt, really good player. Gleyber Torres, really good player. So he definitely has players that can take him into the playoffs. He's just got to see, try and avoid that injury bug just like the rest of us. But Hanko's a good manager, and I trust him to build on this 1-0 performance.
And Connor, what did you see with this matchup? Connor, are you with us?
I'm here. I think Comco is really the bats are going to carry, and we're going to see how that holds up with the most competitive teams. I know he's had some injuries as well he's accounted for, and I'll be very curious to see in the weeks ahead if how those are updated. Dave has some really good offensive bats, but I'm not sure what takeaways there really are from this matchup. Kind of went how I expected, and I guess that Hamko scores more points relative to the extended week going forward.
Yeah, for me, I think at the end of the day, Homco's going to be pretty disappointed with his week 1 performance. Anytime you can get the win, it's a win. You got to be happy with it. But I think 844 points total, only 320 pitching points. I think Homco knows the team can be better. I think the aspirations are higher than that kind of performance. And, personally, I think there will be improvements. I think that this team can get better over time. He's going to get more than a -6 out of a Tristan McKenzie. Bibby's going to do more than 3 points. And as Paul touched on, Crochet with 88 on the White Sox. I mean, just an incredible week. Can he keep it up? That's going to be huge for the Cannonballers. But yeah, I think he's probably disappointed, but I think there's plenty of reason for optimism too. As for Dave, he's stuck in a rebuild. He's stuck trying to find arms anywhere he can get them. I think his offense was more than fine this week with 484 points. I think pitching is just what ultimately let him down. Minus 38 points between Kyle Hendricks and Kyle Freeland. Griffin Canning only 1 point. He's got to get some production there to even be involved in games, involved in matchups. But again, I think Dave's looking for the future. I think he's looking for arms. I think he's just kind of being patient and seeing where things go. So that will conclude our week 1 roundup. I think it was a great week. A lot of these matchups were very exciting to watch. And, it kind of came down to the weekend. Some teams pulled away, but all in all, it was a really, really fun opening week for our league. We will now turn our attention to the week 2 preview. These matchups, it's Tuesday night, so some of these matchups all of these matchups have already gotten going. Again, there's a lot of matchups that's very interesting to me. I'm going to kind of start with the one that I believe is most interesting, and I will go with the Hartford Yard Goats versus the Rocky Mountain Vibe. Right now, that score is 254 Yard Goats to 172 Vibe. Paul, I'll let you jump in here. What's your thoughts for how this matchup goes in week 2?
So this is a really good matchup, probably the matchup of the week. John Haidt, both of these teams won in their first week. And I think both of these teams will be easily playoff contenders, if not playoff favorites. Um, we've talked about before, the rule change that we made this offseason with limiting in season or in week player acquisitions, basically eliminating as much streaming as we could. So Bry took that to heart, built his team up this offseason, has really good depth now, pitching wise and hitting wise. So he, I think, really got a good chance to take down John Height. I know that John Height's up about 80 points right now, but there's a long way to go here still. I'm going to end up taking, I think, John Height to win, but I easily could see where Bry gets the win here. Corbin Burns obviously made a start already for John Height, dropping 39 today on the Red Sox. But yeah, I think this could go either way.
And Connor, how do you see this matchup going?
Height wins the battle, Bry wins the war. The Argos already have a few more innings than the Rocky Mountain Vibes do. I think that, John is doing what he needs to keep streaming. David Fry, Favors as JT Real Muto's injured. Mookie Betts already with 17 because of course he does. But I think Bry's going to stick around and really prove that he is in the upper echelon of contenders. Christian Javier, decent start. He's going to get a second one. So very curious. I think this is going to be a 70-point matchup in the Argos' favor, but this might show that Bry is really in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to picking a matchup that the Yard Goats are in, listen, this team went 19-0 last year, ran through the playoffs, won the championship game, and then won week one. John Height's never lost. So I simply can't pick them to lose until they do lose. I do think it's going to be a great matchup. I think Bry's going to be in it. I think Bry's going to use every one of those 10 waiver ads that he can to kind of get his team in the best position that he can. But ultimately, I just simply can't pick against John Height. And as I mentioned when we talked about his week one performance, I said if his pitching is mediocre, he's going to be really hard to beat, maybe even impossible to beat. And so far through 2 days, he's had 5 starts. Corbin Burns with 39, Eovaldi with 26, Gallen with 20, Merrill Kelly with 13, but he's going to have more if he gets the quality start in the win, and Carlos Rodon with 36. That's not mediocre. That's above average. And with that, I just don't think that John Height can be beat. So I'm going to give the win to the Yard Goats. We will move on now to another very, very interesting matchup. Portland Sea Dogs versus the Norfolk Tide. Right now, Jab is out to an early lead, 183 to 105. Paul, jump in, man. What do you see happening this week with your matchup?
So, again, the schedule maker, whoever that guy is, did not do my team any favors. Starting with Cody, now taking on Jab. I think I have a chance, but the early returns are not very promising. My first 2 starts of the week today were George Kirby and Alex Wood. They combined for -2 points. So not a fun first 2 starts. There was a lot of praising George Kirby in this podcast so far, and he had a great first start, and his last 2 starts have combined for -18 points. I'm not moving him, but it's not very encouraging. I'm going to need big starts out of guys like Freddie Peralta, out of Tanner Hoke. I need him to stay hot. I'll have Nick Lodolo come back for me. That's one of the pitchers I'm getting back. He'll, I believe, start Saturday. See what we got. It's not very promising, though. My bats are already behind his. It's hard to compete with guys like Bobby Witt, Corey Seager, Juan Soto, and Jordan Alvarez, not to mention Fernando Tatis. I'll do my best to keep up, but it's going to be a long road. I think Jab is going to end up winning and sending me to 0-2.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of interesting. I know it's early in the matchup. It's only Tuesday night. But right now, the pitching matchup between the two of you, Jab has 12 points and you have -7. That's very, very interesting to see. Obviously, like I said, it's Tuesday. It's early. That's going to change. I will say this though. I'm just not sure. I think Paul, with he's going to have 10 more starts. I know Jab's only had one start. It was a Luis Castillo start that only got him 3 points. I think Paul's going to take the jump pitching wise here. I think Paul's going to outscore him pitching wise, and because of that, I think Paul's going to win the matchup. Maybe if I was comping these two teams on paper, I would probably give the advantage to the Sea Dogs, but I think the Sea Dogs really scuffled last week, and they're kind of going into the early part of this matchup doing the same. The offense looks solid. Juan Soto just keeps destroying the baseball. So does Jordan Alvarez. But I think Paul can counter that. I think he can counter that, And so I think J-Rod, Julio Rodriguez gets going for Paul, and I think he steals a win this week. Connor, what do you see in this matchup?
I completely agree with Cody that I think Paul can outlast this team. We are going to make a big deal about George Kirby having a tough start. Luis Castillo has not only had 3 points, I think. So it's not as if a lot of bullets are left for the Sea Dogs. And Paul is already going to be a bit more aggressive on the waiver wire than Jab is. So I think that more bullets are just going to come at the Sea Dogs, and Paul has the better infrastructure to beat a team in that position. So if this is a Week 10 matchup when both teams are at full health, I think the Sea Dogs win. But even though there is a 70-point deficit currently, I think Paul's offense is going to be fine, and the pitching is going to pull them ahead.
Absolutely. So we will jump now. Let's talk about the Bowling Green Hot Rods matchup against the Rochester Red Wings. Paul, I'll let you start us off here. What do you see in this matchup?
Yeah, poor Dave. That's what I'll say first. Already bordering on 200 points for the lead for Cody here. He's had 3 starts. All 3 have been 35 plus points. Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I'm just gonna say he's not gonna overcome this deficit, barring a no hitter or perfect game. I guess it could happen. It happened last week. But like we said when we were breaking down Week 1 match, it's tough for Dave to compete with the big dogs of this league, of which Cody is one. And he actually had a nice start from Martin Perez, good quality start. But yeah, it's going to be Cody this week. Mike Trout's already got 41 points. Ellie's got 42. He had that inside the park home run this week already. So yeah, it's going to be tough sledding, I think, for Dave this week.
And Connor, what do you see with this matchup?
I don't see much with this matchup. Cody's going to win this pretty convincingly, and I think Dave's aware of it. I'm going to spend this time praising Mason Miller. I think that he is going to be a difference maker and already has 16 points. And then for Dave, I think the biggest question is how much can Spencer Torkelson's value go up before he's inevitably traded back to Bracton. So this is one of those where you kind of know the outcome before it happens. Dave has upset Cody before, but this is not going to be one of those weeks.
And Connor, I'm glad you reminded me of Dave upsetting me last year. Horrible, horrible loss I took last year at the hands of Dave. My team completely crapped the bed. I think I barely broke 450 for the week that week. So I'm again. This is revenge week for me, as week one was. Um, Team started hot through 2 days. There's a lot of matchup left. Um, and I appreciate you touching on Mason Miller. That accusation was kind of me playing chess, not checkers. There, um, Paul talked earlier about my three closers. You know, having Mason Miller with starting pitcher eligibility gives me four closers and four high end, high strikeout closers. And I think that gives me an advantage, when we're dotting I's and crossing T's. So that was a big move for me to land him. Like to see that he's already gotten a save this week for me. But yeah, if this matchup shouldn't be close. If this matchup is close, my team is playing down. And so, that's nothing against Dave. Dave knows where his team is. Um, he's working to get things right. But yeah, he just doesn't have the horses to compete this week. We will move on now to the Bismarck Larks versus the Oklahoma City 89ers. I'll go ahead and start. Really cool to see Bragton jump out to a lead. I think most people's gonna have the Chad's Oklahoma City 89ers winning this week, but Bragton's gonna compete. Got a little 50-point lead here. He does have already used 4 starts. But right now, he does have the lead. I do think Chad is ultimately the better team. I think Chad's the more complete team. But we knock Bracton's team because of the youth movement and the inconsistency. But with the inconsistency, we talk about the lows, but there's also highs. And Bracton could have a week where he puts up 800 points. Um, he's got those high end kind of volatile players where they're either gonna be a dud or they're gonna have 100-point weeks. So Bragton could be in this matchup. I do think it'll be close, but I'm going to give the advantage. I think Chad gets his first win and kind of starts gaining some momentum. Paul, what do you see with this matchup?
Just 2 words for Bracton. Jackson Holiday. It happened right before we started this podcast. Jackson Holiday called up to the Baltimore Orioles. Jackson Holiday has high potential to become my favorite player in baseball. I just love Jackson Holiday. I wish I still had him. But at the end of the day, Jackson Holiday isn't going to win this matchup for Bracton. I hope, as an Orioles fan, I hope he comes out on fire. It's more likely that he's gonna, maybe be on the bench every now and then this week. So at the end of the day, I'll take Chad to win this matchup. But another name that I wanted to mention for Bracton before I got to Chad's team is Bryce Terang of the Milwaukee Brewers. Already has 28 points this week. Had a really good week in the first week as well. The dude's hitting 353 right now. It's just crazy. That Brewers team is very young, but also has a fair amount of young good talent, all playing at the major league level right now. So I'll take Chad to win this. I don't think it's going to be by a ton. I think this has potential to be a very close matchup. But when I look at the arms, I just, Brandon Pfaadt, Joe Ryan, Kyle Harrison's pitching a good game right now. Reed Detmers, if he can continue his week 1 stats, I just think that there's too much in the pitching end for Bracton to overcome. Without even mentioning how great Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, Lee, Jung Ho Lee have already been this week. So yeah, it's Chad for me. But I'm really looking forward to seeing Jackson Holiday play, both as an Orioles fan and as a fantasy baseball player, just to see the impact that it has on Braxton's team.
Yeah, and shout out Braxton for making the call up when Jackson Holiday got called up today. I always like to see that. Uh, I guess I don't really love the theme of big time prospects getting caught up at the major league level, and then fantasy owners just want to sit on them in the minors. Braxton knows a stud when he sees one. He wants to use his horses when he can use them, and so I respect kind of the immediate call up there. Connor, what do you see with this matchup?
The big number that sticks out to me is Braxton's current projection of 610 points. I think Chad is going to win this. There's a 50-point deficit, but Braxton's pitched 18 more innings already. That number is going to be a whole lot closer near the end. If Braxton hits 600 points, of course, a young team will have ups and downs, but that will really tell me that the team is going to be competitive and vying for a playoff spot. If not, I think the concerns will be valid of how much is the youth movement gain in the way of that competition. And then for Chad, just seeing the young players develop, Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford are already top 20 outfielders. Jung Ho Lee's had a nice performance, and the pitching is just going to keep developing. So I think Chad's going to do this, but this is going to be a really close matchup and going to come down to the last. I'm going to say it comes down to Sunday.
Interesting takes. We will move on now to the Clearwater Beach Dogs versus Connor's Amarillo Sod Poodles. I'll start things off here. It's pretty interesting to see Hen Dog's bats, man. Acuna's got 29 points, Tucker 12, Brian Reynolds 22, Corbin Carroll 24, Bo Bichette 17, Joe Ram 24, Pete Alonso 21. 159 points so far offensively through 2 days. That's outscoring Connor's entire team. Pitching wise, he's only got 70 points. Bednar with an absolute dud, a minus 20. That's going to be tough to overcome for Hen Dog. But yeah, it's the offense, man. It's what we talked about with week one. It's what Hen Dog's going to rely on to beat Connor this week. I'm going to say this. I do think Hen Dog wins the matchup. I just can't pick the Sod Poodles, but Connor, I'm afraid the same exact thing's going to happen. I think you're going to be in this on Sunday morning when you wake up. I think you're going to be right there. I think if one or two things lucky happen for you on Sunday, I think you could sneak away with the win. If I was a betting man, I'm going to put my money on Hen Dog solely because of the offense. But yeah, I do. Fantrax has this as basically a 200-point swing for Hen Dog. I just don't see it that way. I don't think the pitching gets going for Hen enough to get that kind of lead. And I think Connor just keeps, kind of picking off with Kyle Quantrell, 22 points, Spitzer Turnbull with 33 points, drop Pierce Johnson, yeet him to the moon, minus 12 points. But yeah, I think Connor's going to hang. I think it's going to be another one of those disappointing, Hen Dog kind of pulls away on Sunday matchups. Connor, I'll let you go. How do you see this going?
Oh, I think I'm going to get my clocks cleared, but that is expected when you're going up one of the big boys. My current projection is 500 points. If I hit that, I'm going to be relatively comfortable with myself, but this is really an audition to see, can I compete with a top tier team for the second week in a row? And are there any players that will already stand out? Brandon Marsh, I got off of waivers. He's already at 23 points this week. That is definitely something I'm going to continue monitoring. Taylor Ward with a nice start. I'm up against fair players, but no harm in trying to see how close I can keep this.
For sure. Paul, what do you see with this matchup?
So I kind of land right in between both of you guys. I don't think Connor's going to get his clock cleaned necessarily, but I don't think it's going to be coming down to Sunday either. I think Hen is going to end up winning this probably by around 100, 150 points, somewhere in there. I do think Connor scores. I think he clears 500 points pretty easily. He'll probably be around 550 to 570, somewhere in there, with Hen around probably 700 or so. It's just hard for Connor to compete with the likes of Acuna, Tucker, Reynolds, Carroll, Bo Bichette, Jose Ramirez, Pete Alonso. It's really tough to compete with those type of guys. I mean, even the best lineups in the league would have a tough, time competing. But I do look forward to seeing the moves that Connor has made and will continue to make, whether it's free agency, whether it's trades. He's done a great job of taking this roster and making it so it's not just a W in the win column. It's not I'm playing Connor this week. That's just a bye week basically. I don't have to pay too much attention. No, you got to pay attention to beat Connor, which in and of itself is commendable with what he's done.
For sure. Been interesting to watch Connor kind of take over some scraps when he joined us last year, and really quickly putting some things together to as Paul mentioned, he's not the guaranteed win he was last year. Through a week and a half of this season, I'm sure of that. We will move on now. We will talk about the matchup, El Paso Chihuahuas versus the Kannapolis Cannonballers. I'll start us off here. Again, I mean, I don't want this pod to be a bash on Smell session, but unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to pick him to win too many matchups this year. I think, again, these are just two teams going in two very different directions. For me, what's interesting to see is what can the Cannonballers do? Homco, I think, maybe is under the most pressure in the league to kind of take a step forward from last year. Last year he kind of got the pass, right? We all said, hey, it's a good team, but there's been a lot of bad luck. It's been tough for Homco. He's going to be better next year. Well, now it's kind of time to put up or shut up for the Cannonballers. I don't think he's going to get a pass this year. With injuries and different things. So that's what's interesting to me about this matchup. What can Homco's team do? Are they going to be, I think they're going to win this matchup regardless, but is he going to score in the 500s? Is he going to score in the 600s? Can he break that 700 mark, which is kind of, I think, the consensus standard of if you're a top team in this league, you're kind of coming in around that 700 mark each week. So, for me, that's what I'm going to be watching. I do want to shout out Smell got 35 points from Joe Ross today. Joe Ross was the guy I was kind of monitoring in spring training, was kind of iffy about, but that's a great start for him. Good for Smell to be able to, baseball's funny. Reese Olson was a guy with just a ton of hype all off season. He gives Smell a negative 11 start. Joe Ross, a guy he picks up off free agency, and he gets him 35. That's baseball in a nutshell. But, I think it's going to be just interesting to sit back and kind of see what Homco's team is. Because I think out of all 14 teams in the league, he's kind of got the one team where everybody's kind of like, there's question marks there. Like, what is this team? Is this a top elite team? Is this a battle for a 6th, 7th seed playoff team? Or is this a team that falls short again? So we're going to be watching for that. Connor, I'll let you jump in here. What do you see in this matchup?
Yeah, I think the matchup itself is pretty obvious. The Cannonballers are projected to beat the Chihuahuas by 150 points or so. No surprise there. I think the big thing for the Cannonballers will be how does the pitching look. Sonny Gray just came back and threw 26 points in 5 innings. If he can be as good as he was last year with the Twins, that is going to help Homco hit that upper echelon of teams. Tristan McKenzie, was his good start today, or I guess yesterday, just because of the White Sox, or is he fully healthy and really gaining a stride? And for Smell, not to be a dead horse, this is, I think, exactly what he expected. Javier Assad's been a top 30 pitcher so far. As Cody, as a Cubs fan, I hope wants to see that, but I think this isn't going to say too much. The biggest thing, will Hongo's pitching continue to develop compared to last week?
Absolutely. And we will move on to our last matchup of week 2. This matchup really, this has got all the makings to end up being the matchup of the week. I think you see, the Yard Goats facing the Bryce Rocky Mountain Vibe, and you think, hey, that's the one everybody's watching. And certainly so it will be. But this matchup here, a lot of eyes are going to be on this matchup. The Richmond Flying Squirrels versus the Nashville Sounds. Flying Squirrels lost last week. Sounds won. Now they square up. I think all things considered, this is 2 pretty evenly matched teams. I want to say that the Flying Squirrels have the advantage offensively, and I think the Sounds have a slight advantage from the pitching department. Scott's already gotten a huge start out of Nestor Cortez, 46 points. But he's only had 2 starts. Logan Allen looks like he's came back down to earth a little bit. 3 starts. He also got Aaron Savali with a 14-point start tonight. This is going to be, because listen, we were low on the Titas and the Sounds, but he got the no-hitter and he got the win in week 1. And now you feel like, and I think we said he was the number one. He led the league in scoring, I think. So now, you start to think, okay, are the Sounds for real? Well, this matchup is going to tell us. This is, Scott is going to have a good week. I think Scott's going to kind of end up around that 580 to 650 in points wise. Where do the Sounds end up? How many moves does Tita make to change his team during the week? It's going to be really interesting to see how this one comes out. I think as things stand right now, I'm going to give the advantage to the Sounds. I think pitching carries over offense, and I do think that the Sounds have better pitching right now. So I'm going to give the advantage to the Sounds, but I think that this matchup may come down to the Sunday night game. I think it may come down to 10, 15, 20 points tops. It's going to be really interesting to watch. Paul, what do you see with this matchup?
Yeah, I would tend to agree that this is going to be a close matchup. You highlighted that it's an important matchup for Tita to kind of prove. Was last week a fluke? Was it not? Is he in the top half of the standings? Or is he kind of like everybody predicted? Is he in the bottom half? But I also want to highlight that this is a big week for Scott as well. He kind of was in that bottom half of the rankings as well. But he had a good, strong performance last week. Can he build on that? Can he? So both of these teams, I would say, probably have at least somewhat maybe 7th seed playoff aspirations. Well, if you want to make the playoffs, if you want to get in, these are the kind of games you got to win, both sides. So I think it's going to be a close matchup. I do think both of these teams will finish between 550 and 600. For Tita, I do want to highlight, since we didn't get to highlight him in the week 1 recap because he moved teams, Jared Jones. Jared Jones is the pitcher from Pittsburgh, rookie pitcher, just kind of not out of nowhere necessarily, but among the top pitching prospects for Pittsburgh, like Paul Skeens, like Bubba Chandler, Anthony Solometo, wasn't really a heralded guy, but just this spring training just kept throwing 100 miles an hour, kept striking guys out, turned enough heads that he made that team's rotation. So 32 points in his first start, 22 in his second start. If he's the type of guy that Tita can build around, who obviously who knows if Tita's building around anybody. You never unpack your bags when you get to Nashville. So, but he's definitely a guy I'm looking forward to watching in this matchup. He plays at the Phillies, so it's going to be a good test for Jared Jones and to see what he can do if he can carry that rotation. I didn't make a pick. I will take Tita barely, but this definitely has the makings of a classic matchup.
For sure. And before we get to Connor, I want to say I'm sitting here watching the Cubs and the Padres. And as a manager, is there a more embarrassing move than Joe Musgrove? It's in the fifth inning. It's a 1-1 game. Joe Musgrove loads the bases, no outs. They make the call to the bullpen. The manager pulls Musgrove out of the game, goes to the bullpen. Relief pitcher comes in, throws one pitch to Christopher Morel. He hits it 480 feet for a grand slam. It's like, that has to be the lowest feeling as a manager, to think you made the right call, and then one pitch later, the score's 5. It was actually we were up 1-0 when he hit the grand slam. So it was 1-0. He brings in the relief pitcher. Now it's 5-0. Pretty interesting there.
So
Go
what's
ahead.
what's more embarrassing? That happening or having an 8-0 lead and then losing 9-8?
Did you really, dude? That's the past. That was forever. When was that?
Right. Forever
That
ago.
was.
Got it.
I don't even remember that game.
Me neither.
Anyways, we're gonna move on because negativity's entered the podcast. And Connor, the matchup between Scott and Tita. What's your thoughts with this matchup in week 2?
So the last thing that comes to mind with Tita is young pitching, because he is prefers older pitchers, more experienced, maybe less likely to blow out their arms. But this matchup is going to come down to Tita's young pitchers. Jared Jones, how will he do against the Phillies? Luis Gil, the current 5th starter for the Yankees, how does he continue to look? Ronel Blanco and Reynaldo Lopez are each 30, but they don't have much experience starting. How do they hold up? Lopez looked pretty good in a test against the Mets. So right now, it's a close matchup. The innings pitched are close. I'll give the edge to Tita just because of team incumbency, and you don't know how this team is going to go, but Tita's always moving his team up. But I do think Scott's going to make a nice statement here. Last year, there were 3 teams very closely competing for the 7th seed, and I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened, and these were 2 of the closest competitors for it. So this is the fireworks. I think this is the closest matchup of the week, but I think Nashville's going to get it.
Okay, and that will wrap up our week 2 preview. And as we transition into kind of our final segment of the podcast here, where we talk about the trades through week 1. I was supposed to do this before I did the week 2 preview, but I kind of got backwards there. Paul called me out for it. But I do want to mention something that's pretty interesting here that we kind of talked about at the end of the week 2 preview that kind of can lead us in to talking about some trades that's went down in the league recently is Jared Jones. I want to talk about him for just a second. All 3 of us kind of mentioned him when talking about Tita's team in week 2. I think that's kind of the piece. Wouldn't you guys say that Tita has consistently been missing throughout his time in the league? I think that he kind of builds and he moves things around, but he's never really had or never really hangs on to a piece that I would consider you can build around, right? kind of the guy to say, look, Jared Jones, I've got this young guy. He's showing ace stuff. Who knows what he'll develop into? But you kind of want to say, look, Tita's going to manage his team the way that he wants to. Last year, it worked great for him. But I would almost like to see him hang on to Jared Jones. I would like to see him kind of say, this is kind of the anchor of my staff. I think that would be a good look for the Nashville Sounds. And of course, he's already put Jared Jones on the trade block. Nothing's happened yet, but by the time we conclude this podcast, he may be moved. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that Tita should hang on to a guy like that, or do you think we should get out of Tita's way and just let him do his thing? Paul, I'll let you go. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know Tita has his style. It's to not hang on to guys necessarily. Is to just keep wheeling and dealing, and putting guys out there that he thinks are going to score the most points in any given day, week, a couple weeks, month, whatever it is. But Jared Jones, I don't know that necessarily. I think he's like an ace, but he's a very good pitcher. I don't think there's really any denying that. I had said before that he kind of came out of nowhere, but it's not necessarily true. Like, he's been a name that's kind of been top 10 Pirates prospects for a year or two. He throws really hard, which, sometimes that's concerning given the current landscape of MLB pitching. The guys that throw the hardest seem to be the guys that are getting injured with Tommy John surgery. But, I mean, 24-year-old pitchers, they just don't grow on trees, and especially 24-year-old pitchers that scored 32 points and 22 points in their first two starts of their careers. So I think it'd be nice just to see teams kind of hang on to the pitcher, this one in particular, just to kind of be like, okay, I have my guy. He's my guy. You're not gonna get him. And I'm just gonna roll and hope for the best. Would it anger me? Would it upset me if he traded him? No, but it would be nice to kind of see Tita be like, okay, I guess this is my guy. I'm putting my foot in the ground for him.
Connor, what's your thoughts with that?
It's Tita. Jared Jones is probably going to be traded away from the Sounds at the highest possible value, and Tita is going to bring him back at his lowest when it's only going to go up from here. So I do think it's fun to have a franchise player, especially one that kind of bucks the trend of how Tita likes to have his pitchers, but I don't in practice really see it happening.
Right. I agree with both the kind of where you guys stand. And like I said, Tita's going to do his thing. And the only track record that we have to go off of is it's very successful. The Sounds were great last year. But I think, just for me, just a thought that I had as we discussed Jerry Jones is, I almost feel like maybe that's the one piece that the Sounds are missing. Maybe not the one piece, so to speak, but something the Sounds are kind of missing. And I think maybe that's what ended their season, what Tita would believe prematurely last year is it's also fluctuating. Is there anything consistent in place that he can kind of hang his hat on? And listen, as Paul touched on, I don't know that Jared Jones is that piece. Maybe Tita doesn't view him as that kind of anchor guy. Will just be interesting to see what Tita does. As I said, Jared Jones is on the trade block, so it will be interesting to see kind of what route he decides to go there. So we will go ahead piggyback off of that, and go ahead and jump right in to some trades that went down in week one. We're going to start with the kind of pretty big trade, in my opinion, that went down the night before opening day. Paul gets Matt McClain. Cody gets Noel V. Marte and Spencer Schwellenbach. I'll start since I was involved. Paul, I'll go to you. And then Connor, you're welcome to chime in too with kind of your thoughts on the deal there. this is a weird trade. I think it was for me. I know Paul. For Paul, maybe it was less weird. He loves Matt McClain, rightfully so. Matt McClain's a great player. For me, this is kind of where I stood. Matt McClain is a great player, but he went down and he's going to be out for a while. Now, for Paul, this is me speaking for Paul, and Paul's going to have a chance to speak for himself. I feel like Paul is more suited to sit and wait on Matt McClain and then reap the benefits when he comes back. For me, my thinking is, okay, I was really relying on Matt McClain for a certain level of production in my lineup. And you've got to remember that I also had Von Grissom that started the year on the IL. Thankfully, I think he's back in a couple days. But I've got both those guys on the IL, and knowing Matt McClain's going to be out for a while. Okay, so you're thinking, okay, Cody, why did you trade him for Noelvi Marte, who's suspended for 80 days? I'll explain. My thought process was this: I did not think I was going to get the bat that I wanted and needed in my lineup with trading just Matt McClain. A lot of people don't like to sit on these injury guys. They don't like to use up an hour space on a guy for 8, 10, 12 weeks. Excuse me, however long it may be with McClain and his bum shoulder. So, and I did shop him and kind of talk to some people. Nobody was really willing to throw me a bat that was going to be what I felt was worth trading Matt McClain. So me and Paul kind of dove in and got on Noelvi Marte. And my thought process with Noelvi Marte is, yes, he's suspended for 80 games, but he's a prospect. People are going to be much more willing to sit on him. And so I never had any intention of keeping or using Noelvi Marte. He was a pure trade chip for me that I was actually able to get a trade for later in the week. So that was kind of my thinking there with that move. I felt like with Matt McClain's injury, I just wasn't going to get what I needed, and I thought Noelvi Marte could get me that. Paul, I'll let you go. What's your thoughts with this move?
Yeah, you captured it pretty well from my end. I know I have a lot of injuries already with pitching, but a guy like Matt McClain, he's probably top 5 favorite fantasy player for me. I had him at one point last year, and I think I traded him like almost immediately. Not very smart on my part. And I kind of been, low key in the background, monitoring, seeing that he's been traded back and forth 1,000 times this past off season. Just kind of waiting for the right moment to see if I could, go and snag him. And then he tears his labrum and shoulder. He's out for a while. I don't know if he'll come back in time to have any contribution for me for this year. But Matt McClain's a guy I'm willing to wait on. I think he's a very, very impactful player. High batting average, high, 25, 30 home runs, 25, 30 steals. That's the type of player I think I'm getting with Matt McClain at a premium position, second base. At the time, I had Zach Eloff, who I called at the time and still right now agree with that. He's Matt McClain light. The only difference I see between Geloff and McClain is Geloff will have, in my opinion, a lower batting average and more strikeouts. But he's a very good player, and I said, well, if I can have one, why not have two? And so that's why I made the trade, saying to myself, well, I have depth in the future, young depth at that. And if I could trade one of those two for something else. But my full intention is that Matt McClain is home. It would take something that right now I can't really foresee happening to get me to move him. But as for Noel Marte, I think he's a really, really, really good player as well. Wasn't a fan of moving him, but at the end of the day, for me, it's Matt McClain, and I know what his value is to me. I know what his value is around this league. If he can come back to be the player that he was in 2023, then it's worth Noel Marte.
For sure. And Connor, if you want to touch on this, so kind of what was your thoughts seeing that trade go through?
I mean, I think it was really interesting for two different reasons. One, of course, both players had their own reasons for questions. Noel Marte getting suspended, Matt McClain with a slight shoulder injury that turned into a half season or full season killer. And it's two premium positions. Second base or third base are not the easiest slots to fill in this league. So both GMs had their reasons. I thought it was a pretty good trade. I maybe lean McClain for fantasy purposes, just given the wide variety of skills he can bring, but I really liked it overall.
All right, we will move on now to a trade that, well, when it went through, it kind of hurt me. I didn't see it coming. I had been talking to Smell kind of off and on, to the best of my memory, about Christopher Morel. It was the guy I was targeting, guy that I wanted. I guess I didn't really full court press Smell for Morel, and I didn't think I had to. I thought I could kind of have some time there, and then boom, Chad gets his hands on him. And I figure Morel's home with Chad, so I really haven't even bothered. But the details of the trade are Chad receives Christopher Morel, Smell gets Roman Anthony, Matt Shaw, and J.R. Ritchie. Paul, I'll let you chime in. What did you think about this trade?
So, as a former Christopher Morel owner myself, I do like him a decent amount too. I went to a Cubs-Orioles game last year, and Morel hit a home run that it's still ringing in my head, just how loud the crack of the bat was. Obviously that's not all you can judge a player on, is how loud the ball comes off their bat. But Morel's a good young player, 24 years old, playing third base right now for the Cubs. Just, a solid player. But Roman Anthony, I think, has potential to become a top 10 prospect in baseball by midseason. Really good player. Matt Shaw, good shortstop in the Cubs organization. J.R. Ritchie, kind of, maybe a little bit of a throw in. But overall, I like the deal for both sides. Smell gets, a very good young player. Two pretty good young players, I should say. And Chad, Chad has just a young roster stacked full of talent, of young talent, I should say, particularly with Langford and Carter. And Christopher Morel just adds to that.
Yeah. For me, and now that we're talking about it, it's funny how these trades kind of lean into one another in our league. But I think like I mentioned with Matt McClain, I didn't think I could get a bat I needed really with Matt McClain, so I that's why I traded him for Noelvi. I think what I had been talking to Smell about is I was trying to move him Noelvi for like a Morel Mason Miller kind of package. I think Smell maybe felt that was a little too high. We never really could come to terms there, and then Chad kind of swooped in and landed him. In terms of this trade here, obviously I'm really high on Morel for a lot of reasons. I'm a Cubs fan. I think the power is really legit. You talked about the sound of the ball off the bat. Watching him, the second half of last season, in the early part of this season, I really think that there could be some serious power numbers develop there. I do think he's got to make more consistent contact. I don't want to see him slip into a Javi Baez kind of profile. So, but I do think Morel's a good player. Listen, Smell got a good return, though. Again, I'm a Cubs guy. I think a lot of Matt Shaw. Matt Shaw's a really good prospect. a really, really, really good prospect. I think that was a really big get there for Smell, and of course Roman Anthony is as well. So I think that's fair value for Morel. I was disappointed to see it go down. I was hoping I could land Morel, but all in all, I think Smell did well in that trade. I think Chad's happy with who he got in that trade. Connor, do you want to touch on this real quick?
W Smell. I am not a Cubs fan, but I question where Morel's long-term position is or what he ends up being. And Roman Anthony and Matt Shaw are two top 20, 30 prospects for me. So if one of them and a top 20 prospect name in J.R. Ritchie are getting moved for Morel, I would not have been surprised. So to land that second major piece, I think was terrific for Smell's game plan. Chad does have the resources when you have Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, and any of the best outfield prospects you could name. Roman Anthony is a little bit expendable, but just in terms of pure value, I think Smell did absolutely terrific with what he had.
Yeah, and before we move on, the only thing I'll counter with that is that has been my question of Morel too. This offseason, I owned him. I moved him. I think I owned him again. I moved him again. And it mainly what I hang my hat on every time I made that move was what Connor said. I was really concerned about where is Morel's home? Why do the Cubs seem to be so flexible with him? I know there was a lot of reports this offseason that they may trade him, different things of that nature. It just didn't feel like they was really secure with him. But I'll say this. If he keeps hitting like he's hitting, they're going to put him wherever they can find a spot for him. You know what I mean? I think that at the end of the day, with Counsell in place as manager, he likes the moving pieces. He likes to kind of be able to plug and play different things like that. And I think Morel's going to be in the lineup every day. I just don't know at what position. But honestly, from a fantasy perspective, that's honestly more valuable because he's going to have more eligibility. So, but no, I think you're right. I think Smell got great value there. I think both owners were happy in the long run. So we will move on now to another. Smell had a busy week. He was working the books. This kind of plays back into my Matt McClain trade from earlier. Smell gets Noelvi Marte. Cody gets Mason Wynn and Mason Miller. So this is what this is kind of the trade that I talked about and when we were talking about matchups, where it was for me chess not checkers in a playoff run here. Mason Miller was just a huge get for me. If he can stay healthy with starting pitcher eligibility, being able to put him in as like a fourth closer for my team, I really, really think can kind of put me ahead when I'm playing some of the bigger teams in the league. And then the bat, Mason Wynn. So that's probably the part that I had to convince myself the most on. As I mentioned, when Matt McClain went down, I kind of felt that instant need to replace him with a big time bat, but kind of two things happened at once there. Right about the time that I'm thinking I'm going to have to replace Matt McClain, Lourdes Gurriel comes out and hits a home run every time he steps to the plate. So then I'm thinking, okay, do I have my answer to bat to fill that void? Matt McClain's leaving right here on my own team, and then at the time Luis Robert was healthy too. So it was kind of, I kind of thought, okay, Mason Wynn is a guy that I think is going to take a little while to develop, but I think his glove and arm is good enough where he's going to play every day as he develops. I don't know that this kid is going to be an elite hitter, an elite producer at the fantasy level, but I do think there's some really strong potential there. And again, I think he's going to play every day as he kind of figures out how to hit big league pitching. So I kind of see like Zeke Tovar a little bit with him. Maybe Zeke's going to hit for a little bit higher average than Mason Wynn. But Mason Wynn's a guy that I do really like. So getting him coupled with Mason Miller, was enough for me to feel like those two guys combined can kind of fill that void that Matt McLean left for me. Right now, I haven't called up Mason Wynn. I'm letting him sit in the farm system for just a little bit longer. But yeah, I was happy with this move. So, Paul, I'll let you chime in. Kind of what are your thoughts with this trade?
Yeah, so to start with Mason Wynn, um, I agree and disagree with you. That I think he's less of a player than you do, less of a fantasy asset, I should say. I think he's going to be a great MLB player, less of a fantasy asset. You say Zeke Tovar as a comp. I think it's more like Andrelton Simmons, where he'll have a great glove, but I just don't know how well that bat's gonna play. So for me in this deal, Mason Miller is going to have to pull a lot of weight. I understand, and I can get behind your reasoning that he's starting pitcher eligible, but he's a fourth closer essentially for you. And he is a high strikeout guy. I'm not sure if he's a bullpen guy long term. I know Oakland could sure use a couple good starters, but they want to control his innings this year, and I get that. Especially with once again baseball injuries, pitchers being what they are. But at least in the short term, closing for the Oakland Athletics, it doesn't seem to me. I know they won tonight and they've had a few wins the last few days. Doesn't seem to me like they're going to have too many save opportunities for Mason Miller. So overall, I've said my opinions on Noel Marte. I think he's a really solid player. I think he's going to be, a top 10 third baseman in Major League Baseball, if not higher. So, I think Smell is just kind of collecting all the Infinity Stones here. Roman Anthony, Noel Marte, all the picks that he has, all the other prospects that he has, waiting to be called up. So I would favor Smell in this deal. I understand where Cody's coming from. We differ in our opinion, I think, on Mason Wynn. But overall, Cody, if he wants that fourth closer that's starting eligible, then it's a good get, and short term it could work out for him.
And Connor, what do you see with this trade?
I completely get the deal for both sides. I'm sure I have never been a competing team in this league, but there is probably always a fine balance between having the best players possible and keeping some semblance of youth. Cody gets Mason Wynn and Mason Miller, two players that are still young but can help a roster now and in the future. And Smell gets the big prize for the years to come. So I'm not going to be too critical of it either way. Maybe I lean Smell here. I do think Mason Miller is going to be a full-time closer, and I think Dave might use him in unconventional ways, pitching him in 1 or 2 innings in non-save situations. So the starting pitcher value for reliever is going to be pretty big, especially with the reduced waiver ads. That said, great deal from both sides, and love seeing fireworks like that.
All right, we will move on now to the Braxton Tita trade on April 2nd. Braxton gets Kevin Alcantara, Michael Bush, Tyler Soderstrom, Owen Murphy, and Jarlin Susana. And Tita gets Vinny Pasquantino. Paul, I'll let you jump in on this one. What are your thoughts with this deal?
So I'm pretty sure Bragton currently has Vinny Pasquantino. So I haven't looked at how he got him. But in terms of just this deal in a vacuum, Vinny P is my if healthy and producing is my favorite first base dynasty first baseman, not prospect. So it's hard to say that I wouldn't move heaven and earth for a guy like that, because I probably would. Having said that, Michael Bush, I like him a lot. Finally getting at bats at the major league level. Tyler Soderstrom is another guy that I've owned in the past. I like him as well. If he can ever find consistency in his batting average, I think he's an easy 20, 25 home run catcher, which they do not grow on trees. So overall, the package is decent. Harleen Susana, he's a guy that's, starter, reliever, to be determined with the Nationals. But it again, it's a package that I probably also would have paid for a guy like Vinny P. So I don't fault Tita one bit. But with Bracton and his youth movement, that was a decent package for him to get. So a good trade, I think, on both sides.
And Connor, what do you see with this deal?
Agreed. I'm a little bit surprised that it wasn't a collection of worse. Kevin Alcantara has some pedigree. Michael Bush obviously has a starting spot. Susanna could be an elite starter. I think there was a lot of bullpen risk that came into play last year. It's going to come down to Vinny P's health and the support the Royals can have around him. So I get the deal for both sides. With Tita, you never know who's going to stay and who's not going to, but good value there.
Yeah, for me, interesting deal. Obviously, as we'll talk about in just a few moments, like an hour later, I traded for two of the guys Braxton got in this deal. So obviously, I did like the package. I do think this kind of trade, though, is what kind of holds Braxton back. This was 4 days into the season, and Vinny P's first 3 or 4 games had been terrible. Like, I think at this point in the season, he had like 3 points across the 4 games, and it's like Bragton really gives up on guys pretty quickly at the start of the season, and then buys in to hot starts. And I think this trade is a little bit of a sign of that. That being said, I do think that he got solid value here for Vinny P. I'm not as high on Vinny P as Paul is. I do like him. I would probably have him more as if I'm ranking dynasty first basemen, he'd probably be more like 6th, 7th, or 8th for me. Obviously, definitely starter worthy in this league, and there's definitely some skill there, but I do like what Braxton got in return, and I think that all in all, pretty interesting deal. We'll get to Braxton did trade for Vinny Pasquantino back, so we'll talk about that in just a few moments and kind of figure out how that kind of shook out there with Tita and Braxton kind of trading Vinny P back and forth. The next trade we'll talk about is about an hour later. I traded for Kevin Alcantara and Tyler Soderstrom. Braxton gets Zach Neto and Robert Hassel. I won't go into that. This is not a super impactful trade, but I thought it was definitely worth mentioning. Kevin Alcantara is a high-end prospect with the Cubs. He's close to a call-up, a guy I've been after for a while. Chad was kind of holding on pretty tight. Once I kind of seen him getting moved around between Tita and Braxton, I thought now's my time to jump in. I really like him. Soderstrom is another guy that I really like. I think the power's legit. I think there's some contact skills he's working on in the minors. And I was kind of banking on that Braxton had kind of wrote him off since he got demoted in spring training. So he's still prospect eligible in this league, so I can kind of sit on him, wait for him to fix himself in AAA, and I think I can really get some high-end dividends, when he does get caught up. Neto, I gave up Neto and Robert Hassel. I'm completely out on Robert Hassel. I know that kind of when he got drafted by the Padres, he really had some big name value there, but I just don't think he's put it together as he's progressed through the minors. I'm not sure that he ever will. So to me, he was really starting to borderline teeter on the worst. going from this high end prospect, top 50 prospect, to now every time I bring him up to someone in a trade, they kind of act like he's just the worst. So I was trying to find a deal where I could get better value for him than that. And I think I got it here. And then Zach Neto was a guy that's just expendable to me. I know that Paul mentioned kind of the Andrelton Simmons comp with Mason Wynn. That's kind of how I see Zach Neto. I think Wynn's got a little more speed and a little more consistent power. I know Andrelton Simmons with the Braves, he had a couple seasons where he was up there in home runs, 20 home runs. I think Wynn can do that on a more consistent basis and also steal more bases. I think Neto is kind of your true all glove player, and so I don't see a lot of fantasy value there. So both players were kind of easy for me to move. So I like what I got here. Paul, I'll let you touch on it if you'd like.
Yeah, so I've hit on Soderstrom. I agree on Alcantara. Pretty good prospects for the Cubs. Again, like Cody said, likely a call up probably by June, July-ish. Hassel, I'm kind of the same as Cody, that was a big name, big prospect in San Diego. Was part of that Juan Soto trade, I think, from San Diego to Washington, and just kind of has slowly fallen off the map a little bit. I do like potentially him building his value back up. So I think a decent buy low for Braxton. The kid's only 20 years old, 21, something like that. So it's hard to write him off. But I do very much agree with Cody on Zach Neto, that he is definitely that, glove first, bat second type of player. Will be a much better in real life player than a fantasy player. So overall, I think Cody did pretty well. Plus Braxton had to owe a worse on top of this. So, overall, I like it for Cody more than I like it for Braxton. Braxton does get a pro shortstop out of it, which, he's got a lot of good players, but they're mostly in the minors. So having good young talent on the roster, on the big league roster, is helpful.
And Connor, what did you see with this trade?
Yeah, I don't know if there's too much to talk about. I think I favor Cody a little bit, but Zach Neto could completely change my mind. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, there is. I mean, if Neto was to develop some kind of offensive upside, that would definitely kind of sway things a little bit. I guess for me, I was just kind of banking on that he wouldn't, but stranger things have definitely happened. We'll move on now to another big trade. This one shocked me. This one I did not see coming. Tita gets Tanner Bibby. Homco gets Jackson Ferris, Felnin Celestin, Jose Perdomo, Lazaro Montes, and Ty Floyd. Tanner Bibby was not a guy I seen Homco moving. I just didn't think. He's been so kind of clamoring for arms, especially healthy ones. He's had a lot of injuries there. I really didn't think Homco would move him. I do think that he got good value there. Lazaro Montes is a prospect that I think is soaring up in value right now. Felnin Celestin, far away, but another guy that has a lot of helium right now. Jackson Ferris got traded over to the Dodgers. The Dodgers just breed pitchers. I'm sure now that he's in their system, he's going to excel. Ty Floyd is another guy that's interesting. So I do think Tita paid a good price. That's what young pitchers go for. It was just strange to see kind of 4 days into the season, Homco trade away what I believe was one of his better pitchers. Paul, what do you see with this move?
Yeah, I mean, my analysis is almost identical to yours. I've had Lazar Montes and Felon Celestin, I think probably in the last 6 weeks or so. Both of those guys were on my roster. I'm a big believer in the Mariners farm system. I like most of their top guys, including the two that were in this trade. I mean, I think it's a good return. I think it's probably almost too good of a return. I think Homko did pretty well for a guy in Tanner Beebe who I like. I don't know that I love him that much. You know, we'll get to the next trade I think that involves Tanner Beebe, but I was in on trading for him from Tita. But at the end of the day, it's not a guy I'm going to break the bank for. And not necessarily that Tita broke the bank to get him. I know Lazar Montez, when I traded him to Tita wasn't taking offers essentially on him because he liked him that much. And to see him go for pitcher and BB, you know, I get, you know, pitchers have the value that they have in this league, but prospects do too. So overall, I like it more, I guess, for Homko than for Tita, even though Tita gets the pro player. And shout out Ty Floyd. Ty Floyd's an underrated Cincinnati Reds pitching prospect, and Cody touched on the Dodgers breeding pitchers. I kind of think the Reds do too. So it'll be interesting to see what they can get out of him.
And Connor, what do you think about this deal?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit high of a price. You could argue that at least 3 of those specs were very clearly on the up and up, and I'm curious if Homco just saw value there versus potentially the start of a sell. But if Tria's targeting someone, watch out. Cleveland breeds pitchers, and I think Gavin Williams is going to be the future ace there. But if Bybee shows out, he flashed some amazing potential last year, I would not be surprised. So the trade makes sense, maybe a little bit high for my taste, but makes sense for both sides.
Yeah. All right. We will move on now. To me, which was the biggest trade, I think you could argue, of the week. Bracton gets Jackson Morrell, Marcelo Mayer, Clay Holmes. Smell gets Jordan Walker. I've got some pretty interesting takes on this trade. Paul, I'm going to let you jump in first. What's your thoughts on this move?
So I was when Braxton posted Walker on the block, I immediately sent him a PM. Jordan Walker, I like him a lot. I know what Cody's opinion is. I'll let him share it. But I like Jordan Walker a lot. I think he's a good young bat. Only 21 years old. I know he's had his struggles at the professional level, the highest level, I should say, so far. But for me, it's I'm just not going to write off a 21-year-old. I know the talent is there. I think he can tap into it, and if he does tap into it, it's a small price to pay for Smell. I do like Jackson Merrill a lot. I do like Marcelo Mayer. Two really good young players. Merrill's kind of killing it so far in San Diego, and Mayer's probably not too far off in Boston. So I like what Braxton got at the end of the day. You know, 2 really good young bats for 1 really good young bat. But for me, I like Walker a ton. I think Smell did pretty well.
And Connor, what do you think about this move?
I also think Smell wins. It's a decent package. Jackson Merrill is definitely a stud, but I think his value might have been overinflated a little bit for winning the Padres starting center fielder job. Let's see how long he's there for shortstop. Clay Holmes is an interesting piece, to say the least, and Marcelo Mayer, maybe it's devaluated a little bit, but starting to see its stock go back up. Jordan Walker is one of the safest hitting prospects we've had in a while. He had 15 home runs last year, not hitting in too premium a spot in the order of a good Cardinals lineup. So this is definitely a long game move, but I think that Smell got a future franchise cornerstone for when the Sod Poodles turn the corner, or the Chihuahuas.
So yeah, I'm gonna take the different side of the table from you guys. I think Paul probably knew that. He's asked me my opinion on Jordan Walker, and like I told him, um, Walker's 21, 22 maybe. I don't write guys like that off either, but I'm not in love at all. And I told Paul when he was thinking about what he would offer, I said, I'm not gonna want to invest. Walker's the guy that I'm just avoiding, right? I don't want to invest in him and be wrong. So I'm just going to steer clear of. To me, Jackson Morrell's the best player in the deal. I think that he ends up having a better career than Jordan Walker. And to get Marcelo Mayer, who I'm not high on at all, but I do know he has some name value right now. I think Bragton could probably use that to his advantage in future trades. And Clay Holmes, who is the closer in New York, there's definitely some value. A Yankees closer has value. I don't know that he has a lot of value to Bragton's team. I think that maybe he could flip him for more. But I think, for me, I kind of just focus on Jackson Morrell or Jordan Walker. I'm going to take Jackson Morrell there. I think, he's young too, and he's probably going to have some growing pains this year. But I'm kind of just projecting out long term. And for me, I would put my eggs in Morrell's basket rather than Walker's. That's just kind of how I see the trade. We will move on now to another Smell trade. Man, he really was busy. Tita gets Jared Jones and Nolan Gorman. Smell gets Tanner Bibby and Arjun Namala. I'm gonna full disclosure have no idea who that dude is. So Paul, I'll let you go. What do you see with this trade here?
Yeah, so we've talked quite a bit in this podcast about Jared Jones by now. So I'll kind of leave that where it is. Nolan Gorman, I had him last year. You know, big power potential guy, but also big potential strikeout and low batting average guy. Cody mentioned the Javi Baez comp earlier. I'm not saying necessarily that that's who he is or becomes, but that's kind of what he reminds me of. That he lays out for power more than just getting on base and just nice easy contact.
What
Um,
about Dan Ugla?
That's a good one too. Dan
Dan Ugla is who Nolan Gorman reminds me of. Which hey, listen, prime Dan Ugla, there's fantasy value there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. No, for sure. That's a good comp as well. So yeah, like Nolan Gorman, I'm not personally buying into him. The day I sold him, I was happy that I sold him. I'm not looking to buy back in for now at least. And then we talked kind of about Tanner Bibby. Could he be that ace in Cleveland? I guess. I mean, I'm not necessarily a believer. I more believe in Gavin Williams personally. So overall, if Jared Jones is the guy that we've kind of talked about, then just name value alone, I like it for Tita. Smell obviously is building for the future, and he's kind of banking on, I guess, BB to be that guy for him, to kind of head his rotation, at least in the short term. So I kind of like it both ways. I would prefer Tita's side personally, just for Jared Jones, but I can kind of see it both ways.
So I think I'm going to take the opposite of you again, Paul, and I'm going to explain why. Maybe more so from just Smell's perspective here. And I don't know, I haven't talked to Smell about this. But to me, you can't and this is kind of what holds Bragton back, but you can't just have a bunch of lotto tickets And there is real potential. Jared Jones turns into a pumpkin and he's sent back down to AAA and we never mention his name again. Right? Now, listen, he's had 2 starts. They've been fantastic. We just had a full conversation about should Tita consider kind of using Jared Jones as the anchor of his staff and hang out. Listen, I get it. But I'm just saying there's definitely real risk involved with Jared Jones. And I think from Smell's perspective is Tanner Bibby is more of a sure thing. And I think for Smell, it was worth losing Nolan Gorman to kind of secure a pitcher down, to kind of lock that down for him. So I think that's kind of where Smell's thinking was. And I think for Tita, listen, Tita's always looking for assets. He's always looking for assets with name value. So he's got, in this trade, he gets Jared Jones, who everybody in the baseball world is talking about right now. And then he swaps Nolan Gorman for, I believe, Namala is probably of worst level. So, he can do more with Nolan Gorman than he can do with Namala in terms of flipping him for something down the road. So I totally see Tita's side of this. And maybe if Jared Jones can stay where he's at, Tita wins this deal. But I think for Smell, it was kind of about risk management and kind of shedding off. I feel like he paid Nolan Gorman to shed off some risk and get a more secure and stable arm for his pitching. And I think there's real value in that. When we were talking about Bracton's matchup, he's rolling out, he's got a pitching staff full of Mike Sorokas and all these guys that, I'm not trying to pick on Bracton, but it is a perfect example of guys that, I guess there's a chance they could be something, but most likely they're not going to be. And I think Smell's kind of trying to avoid building a pitching staff that resembles that. So he made the move to kind of get a more secure arm. Connor, what do you see with this trade?
So I want to start off by praising Arjun Namala. Currently, MLB Prospects has him number 3 in Toronto's organization, and with Ricky Tiedemann, you can't really put him much higher. But the man has a chance to be an absolute stud. I think Tita got him in the 2nd round, and really think he is a value. This is going to come down to Jared Jones. He was traded right on the hype train, and how long can he live up to that? So. Nolan Gorman's a prospect player I do still like, but I think Jared Jones is really going to be the linchpin of was it worth it to trade Tanner Bibee after such a big move, the Bracton move.
Absolutely. We will move on now as we getting close to kind of wrapping up the trades of the week. We'll talk about kind of full circle moment here. Bracton gets Vinny Pasquantino back. Tita gets Frankie Montas, Carson Williams, and Owen Murphy. Tita takes the Charlie Morton trade step back from the previous Matt Manning trade. Yeah, I don't know what that means, but they got it worked out. Yeah, we've talked about Vinny Pasquantino here. I do think that Bracton kind of gave up on him too early, and then 3 days later he trades for him back. So I kind of like to see that. Montas is a guy that to me Bracton needs the pitching, but if he thinks he can let him go, I know Montas is that perfect Nashville Sounds pitcher. That's who Tita gets him cheap. He builds a staff of guys like that, and Tita wants to bank on. I know. I've had conversations with Tita about this. He would rather bank on Frankie Montas being successful in 2024 than some overpriced 23-year-old, guy that could get hurt. And I know Montas could get hurt too, but Tita likes to put his eggs in the cheaper arms basket, and I think he got kind of the perfect fit with Montas. Carson Williams got thrown around a lot this offseason. There's definitely some concerns with the strikeouts. Carson Williams is a very good prospect. That's a really good get for Tita there. If I doubt Tita wants to wait on him and call him up. This is probably more of a trade chip acquisition. But Carson Williams is a really good prospect, and he gets Owen Murphy. To me, that trade's fine. Vinny P's a solid bat. Montas is going to outproduce his trade value. You can shop him. You're not going to get a lot of hits, but he can produce. And then Carson Williams is a high-end prospect. So I like it for both guys. It's good to see Bracton kind of go back and get Vinny P because I feel like his offense needs kind of more of a solid, reliable bat. Connor, what do you see with this trade?
I'd kill to see the list of Bracton's quote-unquote sons that he immediately needs to get when trading. Vinny P seems to be close to that and is a terrific player, but I'm in complete agreement that this is a fine deal. Montas is a nice arm. Carson Williams has a lot of prospect potential, off to a decent start in 2024 as well. And Owen Murphy's Owen Murphy. So I think this works completely well for both sides. And the question is, how will Tita keep those assets, or how do they move for other pieces to help the Sounds bring a championship in?
And Paul, what do you see with this move?
I'm probably going to take a surprising stance, given my love for Vinny P. I really like this deal for Tita. It's really hard to get pitching in this league, as I think everybody knows. Frankie Montas is not the flashiest name, but he's just a really solid producer on a good team in the Cincinnati. But I really like Carson Williams. I owned Carson Williams for a lot of last year, and I think I had him maybe at some point this offseason. I'm not sure. I'd have to look. I like him a lot, though. I think he's the heir apparent to Wander Franco in Tampa, and I really like him playing next to Junior Caminero long term. I just think he's a really good bat. Obviously, I don't like Tampa too much, but I think he's going to play really well for them. So to give that for Vinny P, who again, he still to this at bat, to this moment, hasn't shown that he is the same guy pre-injury. If he does get back to that, then obviously I like it a lot more for Bracton. But for me, when you're coming off a major injury like that, and I know I'm kind of being ironic here because I traded for Matt McClain, who has, I think, pretty much the same injury that Vinny P had. But you kind of got to see it first before you fully dive in. I like and appreciate that Bracton is trading for major league talent. He desperately needs it because he has a good, probably the best minors system with all the guys he has down there. But now we kind of need to see him kind of realize a little bit of that potential, and trading a guy like Montas away doesn't really help that case.
For sure. And we got, I think, 2 more trades we'll talk about here. We'll jump back into my panic trade. I trade for Gavin Lux and Giancarlo Stanton. Connor gets Mason Montgomery, Spencer Schwellenbach, Alfredo Dunno, and Nick York. A little backstory with this trade. I wake up Saturday, maybe it was Sunday morning. I go to set my lineup, and I end up with one healthy bench bat. It's like I lost 4 guys to injury. And so I was like, I got to get some bats in here. So kind of played around, talked to some people. This kind of progressed pretty quickly between me and Connor. Gavin Lux is a guy I do really like. He had the really bad leg injury last year in spring training, where I think he was kind of on the cusp of breaking out and becoming the Dodgers' everyday shortstop. Took the year off. He's healthy now. He's a guy that I do like, especially as a bench bat. Don't have to have a lot of faith in him or reliance upon him, but if he was to break out, really good to have my hands on him. trading for Giancarlo Stanton was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. I can't stand that dude. He's made of glass. He's an overrated Yankees player, and he sucks, and the Yankees suck, and they're not going to win the division, and it's going to be because Stanton sucks. But I needed some bats that are alive right now. Stanton's still got some pop when he closes his eyes and swings real hard. And so, to me, I felt like it was kind of a move I had to make. Connor, what was your thoughts with this move?
Boo-hoo, Giancarlo Stanton's had like 4 hits and a homer since I traded him to you. But
Yeah, that's very true. That has happened.
in all seriousness, I paid a very nice price to get Gavin Lux from Paul earlier, but I still really like him, but I think these first couple weeks did turn me off a bit. Hitting ninth in the Dodgers order, not getting guaranteed starts against lefties. I think it could be a Vinny P thing of when does he get back to it. And with Ryan McMahon and some other pieces, I was comfortable with how my middle infield looked, and getting Luis Rengifo off waivers was nice. So he was expendable, and I needed to clear the line of outfielders. So Mason Montgomery, Nick York, these are all people that I'm not sure. I don't think they're worse, but maybe a half cut above. So getting those talents was great value for me.
And Paul, real quick, you can touch on this trade if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the trade, just period. I don't know. I don't really like Stanton. Lux kind of touched on it, like, hitting ninth in the Dodgers lineup. It's a good lineup, obviously, hitting basically in front of Mookie Betts, but just I wish that he was able to come back better from his leg injury, from his knee injury. Doesn't seem like that's the case at this moment, but obviously that could change, and I do like Lux's potential. But just from what Connor got, Mason Montgomery is not a worst. This kind of was phrased as 4 worst. I don't think he's a worst. I don't think Schwellenbach's a worst. I don't think Nick York's a worst. So those are 3 pretty decent prospects that Connor got for a has-been that is Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah.
And I'm well aware, by the way, that Cody traded for him and he hit, I think, 2 home runs that same day. So I know what I'm saying, and I know what happened. I don't care. I don't like him. So, I mean, I get why Cody did it. I understand, you want to have, if you're a playoff team or a playoff contending team, you want to have a full bench. So I understand, but to me, it's just like I don't really care trade.
Okay, so you're just a hater. I get
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
We'll move on. The last trade we'll talk about for week 1, actually this trade kind of went down after rosters locked Sunday, but it was Zach Gelof to me, straight up trade for Nico Horner. Paul, I'll let you go first. What's your thoughts with this move?
You're gonna let me go first. Okay. So I like Zach Gelof. I like Nico Horner. I was kind of shopping loosely Zach Gelof because I have Matt McClain, because he's my second baseman in the future. Just kind of seeing what maybe I could get for Gelof. I wasn't gonna make a deal unless it was something I really liked. And I was getting offers that were fine, nothing like crazy. But then Cody just kind of goes 1 for 1 with Horner. Horner to me has a more proven track record, I guess, than Gelof. I mean, Gelof had half a year basically last year, and he killed it, but he started this year slow, as did most of the Athletics. I wanted to wait until after rosters locked because in my delusional brain, I thought I still had a chance to beat Cody. And it was going to rain. It did rain, I should say, in Chicago on Sunday. And I thought that game would get rained out. It didn't. It got delayed, but they did play the game. And fortunately for me, Giloff was a double away from hitting for the cycle on Sunday. So he did score 30-some points for me. It didn't matter at the end of the day, but I was happy to get those points. So just a long term, Nico Horner's a good bat. He's in a good lineup. I like him. I like his speed. He's only attempted one stolen base so far this year, and he got caught. I do believe that will change. I think he's got great contact skills. I know his slugging isn't what Giloff's is, but I think his batting average is higher. I think he steals more bases. I think he scores more runs. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a wash trade at the end of the day. I like both the guys, so I'm not going to talk ill about either one of them. So yeah, I'm actually more interested to hear Cody's side of this, because it's not often that Cody trades away Cubs that I think are decent. So I'm interested to see what Cody thinks of Nico Horner.
Yeah, well, I wish I could give you better than what I'm going to give you, but I'm just going to be honest. I think, and Paul, you know this, I love Zach Gilo for Hilo, for however you say it. I traded him, I believe, to you this offseason, and I've kind of regretted it every day. But he's just a guy that I think the sky's the limit with him. I think, I know he's on a sucky team right now, but listen, the baby A's, man, they've got some really nice players coming up through that system right now. And I think for me, it was just kind of, I really don't know a better way to say it than I would rather win with the guy that I want. Or I'd rather lose with the guy that I want than win with the guy that I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm a Cubs fan. I love Nico Horner. Okay. But from a fantasy perspective, it can get kind of dull owning him. He doesn't do a whole heck of a lot most nights. Yeah, there's a lot of stolen base potential there. He does get on base. Good. This has nothing to. He started terribly slow this year. The trade has nothing to do with that. I'm not, Nico Horner 1 weekend. Like that has nothing to do with it. It's just my team needs, or I felt it needs, just a little excitement, a little pop. That's why I made the move to get Ellie. I mean, Ellie's absolutely electric. Just like, what was it, 2 nights ago, he had 2 home runs. One of them was inside the park home run. I think he totaled like 35 points that day. Those kind of performances win you matchups. And Nico is more of like 4 points, 5 points every single night, which there's a ton of value in that. Don't get me wrong. There absolutely is a ton of value in that. But I just felt like, for me, what I was looking for, Helof is my guy. I just think he's going to end up being a phenomenal player, especially from a fantasy perspective. So I knew you were shopping him. I knew there was some interest there. I knew after you posted him on the block, Tita posted on Maine like 17 times that he sent you one. And I knew he was going to end up snagging him. You and I, we talked about Hilo for like 3 days, if you remember. And we were trying to come up. I had a package around I know Yoshida was involved in it, but there was better players involved in it. I can't think of now who it was, but and we never could come to terms on it. And I was kind of, I think right before I sent you the PM about Nico for Hilo straight up, Tita had posted on Maine like Paul sent you a PM or Paul sent you a trade or something. And I was like, I've been thinking about offering this to Paul for 2 days. I need to do it. I need to lock this deal in and get him. I don't even know that Tita was after him, but it was enough dots for me to connect that I felt the pressure that I needed to make a move. And so that's kind of why I did it. Connor, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's safe versus risky. Zach Geloff could turn into Matt McLean and have a 30-30 season, or he could just completely shit the bed like he has this start of the season. So I really like Horner as a player. I'm curious how in Craig Counsell's system he's going to have stolen bases or what opportunities he has in the lineup. But this is one of the more fascinating deals and good for both sides.
Yeah, for sure. I think Paul definitely likes those safer players much more than I do. And it's bit me in the past when you go guy that's going to have 35-point game and then guy that's going to go -2 4 nights in a row, you know. And I typically, for some reason, I fawn over those guys. I mean, look at my team right now. I'm rostering Vlad Jr., Hilo, Ellie De La Cruz, Jazz Chisholm, Luis Robert. Those are all guys that are going to have these massive games and then kind of stall out. But that for some reason, those players are the ones that just have me. I'm interested in them. And like I said, Nico is honestly like one of the safest fantasy players. You know what I mean? From like just the perspective of you know exactly what you're going to get out of him. And so I think it works for both. I think uh, Paul gets a guy that's a better fit for him, and I got a guy that's a better fit for me. So ultimately, I do have to ask Paul: was Tita involved on Hilo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, among others. Yeah.
Was he close?
Was he close? I'd have to look. I would lean no.
Okay. I felt he
you
was.
were closest.
Say that again.
You were always the closest.
Okay.
But there were others involved.
Hold on. I want to find, just for transparency's sake, what I offer. Oh, it was Jordan Wicks, Harry Ford, and Masataka Yoshida.
Yeah.
We couldn't come. Go ahead.
That was the closest. Full transparency. I was very close to taking that.
Yeah, I thought you would, man. I thought you would. I thought so. So when I offered that to you, my thinking was this: I felt like you really could have used the pitcher, the chip, because I was willing to move a pitcher because Verlander should be back really soon. Walker Buehler's coming back really soon, and I felt like that was a good fit there. I thought, with me having Adley, I mean, I love Harry Ford. He's one of my favorite prospects in the game, but I have kind of tossed him around a little bit this offseason in trade talks because, I mean, my plan is to have Adley at catcher for a really long time and I'll have to worry about it. But I kind of thought that package was nice, man. I think if you liked Yoshida just a smidge more, that would have been our deal.
If it was basically any other bat besides Yoshida,
Dude, I had no other bat.
I know that's the problem.
Like my team, like, dude, everybody was hurt. Like I was like, because I was looking and I was like, I can find somebody to swap Yoshida out with. Like, who cares? That's fine. And I go to my roster and I'm like, okay, if it's not Yoshida, it's Mike Trout. So I don't think I want to do that. So like, and then that's when I started that, like right as we're negotiating this, Tita's on main chat. Paul sent you something, and I'm like, golly, I got to step this up. Like, I got to secure this because I know Tita's coming, man. I know he's lurking. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
but anyways, guys, that wraps up our kind of trade review there. I'll go around the table here with any last thoughts on the week. Connor, I'll start with you. Any thoughts about anything you want from week one or looking forward into week two?
Well, I think the main takeaway from week one is just how competitive this league is. Teams have different strategies, but the vast majority of these games are relatively close, and I'm hoping the same is the case in week two. And let's get some more deals going, gentlemen.
And Paul, any last thoughts as we sign off here?
I mean, I second everything Connor just said. League's in a good spot. Actually, the league's in a great spot, I think. Yeah, deals. Still open for business. At 11:50 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday, I'm the lowest scoring team of the week, so that's fun. Even lower than Smell. So there you go. Maybe Smell's team isn't so bad.
Yeah, I think week one was awesome, guys. I mean, like we talked about it early on, just so many close matchups. Me and Paul has discussed, like, I really think there's like 10, 11 teams that can that feel comfortable saying, I'm going for the playoffs this year. That's really rare in a 14-team league. So that's super interesting. Kind of, I always like to talk about something going on in Major League Baseball. Pretty interesting. The Kansas City Royals. I heard this on the radio today when I was coming home from work. Through 11 games this year, they've given up 28 runs. That's like just over 2 runs a game. And I'm not sure. Let me see if I can pull up here real quick what their record is on the year. The Royals are 7-4, and the Pirates are 9-3. Are we gonna have a Pirates versus Royals World Series?
Obviously,
Obviously, is that gonna happen?
it's going to be held next week.
Yeah, I'm here for it. Another thing is like the devastating injuries in baseball this way. I mean, Shane Bieber looked like prime Shane Bieber and blows his elbow up. Spencer Strider is like consensus best pitcher in the game, blows his elbow up. Framber Valdez looks like he's blown his elbow up. That's super sad for baseball. I want to see the best players play. And I know, like we talked about earlier, like that's huge shoes to fill for Hendog as, he kind of navigates how does he replace Spencer Strider. But anyways, guys, great podcast. Great talking with both of you. And I look forward to the Base on Balls podcast for week 2 next week. If you've listened this long, hopefully we do it on Sunday night. But based on schedules and different things, we'll always try to get it done by Tuesday night at the latest. Most weeks it's going to be a combination of me, Paul, and Braxton. We'll always invite guests on. It was Connor this week. It may be Tita. We might have to we got to get Tita on here for sure. John High will make appearances. Hendog will make appearances. I'm thinking we're going to get Smell on. Let me ask you guys this. What's the over under 50% chance we get Smell on a podcast this season?
Under.
You think under? Connor, what do you think?
Under.
You guys have no faith Smell will join a podcast.
Ask me the over under 1%. I'll take the
What's
under.
really?
Yeah. He's not
Connor?
a voice guy.
He's not a what?
He's not a voice guy, and that's fine.
No,
mean-
I get it.
Smells literally said Napod, and I don't know. I
don't
would
know.
love to hear Smells commentary, but I don't see it happening.
I think if Smell thinks he can win an argument against me, it may entice him enough to be a guest on a podcast.
Be the most listened to podcast that we have.
He's what?
If that happens, if he gets on a pod, it would break numbers.
It probably would break numbers. I guess at most it would be 14. but yes, no, that would be really cool. Who else would be really cool to have on? What about Jab? You think Jab would hop on a podcast with us?
I don't know him well enough to say yes or no.
I tell you this. I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when. When John Haidt loses, we're having everyone's getting on the podcast. Okay,
it.
and it's just going to be 2 hours of all of us discussing what a failure the Yard Goats are. Overrated. We're going to let Braxton just go on a tyrant about. I mean, Braxton is just going to go off on the Yard Goats. We're just going to wait till that he gets that loss, and we're going to do it. That's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, anyways, awesome podcast, guys. I look forward to being back here this time next week for the Week 2 Base on Balls podcast. Thank you guys for listening. We will see you next week.